Germain is a literature teacher at a high school. He has long been dissatisfied with the literary quality of his students, especially this class. A simple weekly essay was overwhelmingly written in a very mundane way. Germain's love of realism was a natural counterpoint to his wife Jenna's artistic pursuits. Jenna is sort of a fan of postmodernism. She runs a beloved gallery filled with unbelievable works of all ideologies. Jenna wanted her husband to understand her ideas, but Germain had a strong disdain for them. The couple's differences in philosophy add to the conflict. Germain is both self-absorbed and paranoid. He has nothing more to say every day than to complain about the stupidity of his students. Jenna was fed up with this. She changed her mind when she heard her husband read the weekly diary of a student named Claude. Claude was an introverted student. He usually likes to sit in the last row of the classroom and observe quietly. One of his weekly journals was a story about voyeurism. The main character is Claude himself. He sneaks into his classmate Raphael's house under the pretext of tutoring math. There he meets Raphael's gentle, elegant mother who smells of the middle class. The story ends in a flirtatious conversation between the two. It ends with a note that it is not finished. Germain is captivated by the fantasies and sentiments of a teenager. His long-extinguished literary passion is also rekindled. He sees in Claude the very talented young man he was. So he decided to tutor Claude alone and encourage him to write. He even shared the article with Jenna, but Jenna suspected that Claude was suffering from a mental illness. As it turns out, Jenna's suspicions were correct. Claude is indeed a troubled teenager. He comes from a single-parent family, with a mother who left home and a father who is disabled and unemployed. Such children often need some psychological counseling, but Germain didn't think it was necessary. He wanted to raise a writing genius, and genius is all about getting as crazy as possible. To make Claude's story even more twisted and bizarre, Germain also deliberately intervened in the student's private life. Before the exam, he reveals the topic to Claude in order to help Raphael get a good grade and gain the Raphael family's trust. In this way, he can prompt Claude more deeply into each other's lives, providing more possibilities for the upcoming storyline. Sure enough, Raphael scored 18 out of 20 on the test. This score made his parents very happy and gave Claude a reason to continue tutoring Raphael. The family loved Claude and he chose Raphael's mother, Esther. Every Saturday, Raphael's father and son would go to the basketball gym to play ball. This time is the opportunity for Claude to spend time alone with Esther. After father and son left, he would come to Raphael's house under the pretext of forgetting his math books. Esther, who is alone at home, is having troubles waiting to be solved. The way to gain Esther's trust is simple. The story of Claude's runaway mother has touched the lives of countless good middle-class women. Esther was no exception. The two talked about the minutiae of life again. Esther needed a listener, and the quiet and insightful Claude was the perfect choice. This delightful chat is forced to end when Raphael and his son are about to return home. By now Esther's attachment to Claude has overshadowed his sympathy for him. Soon, Claude's story reaches its climax, as expected, but this trend is frightening. Germain and Jenna both think so, especially Jenna, who as a woman knows all too well the plight of a wife. Unlike Jenna, Germain still forces him to believe that everything is just a story at this point, but he really can't predict how the story will develop next. That feeling makes him both anxious and curious. Soon Claude handed in a new weekly journal. That night, Raphael's parents have a heated argument. The father then leaves alone and Esther is left grieving in the living room. Realizing that an opportunity has landed, Claude dedicates a pre-prepared letter of confession to Esther. The next day, Claude succeeds in kissing her, but at that moment, Raphael, who was passing by, witnessed all this. He was devastated by the embarrassing truth, so he hanged himself that day. A more disturbing event happened the next day. Germain came to class early in the morning to find that Raphael had not come to school. Panicked, he immediately called for confirmation. Fortunately, Raphael only had the flu. Realizing that the problem is serious, Germain has an in-depth conversation with Claude. He was worried that the plot of the story would really extend to reality. However, asking Claude to end his own story so abruptly was a rather excessive request for both men. Claude angrily threw the originally written ending into the trash. But as you can imagine, Germain was unable to resist the temptation. After Claude leaves, he reads the abandoned ending chapter alone. Germain is embarrassed by the cliched ending of the Raffaele family reuniting. He quickly betrays what he has just said. Germain hastily finds Claude and asks him to rewrite the story with a more perfect ending. An angry Claude changed the ending. In his story, Raphael does not die and his parents' relationship does not break up. Esther became pregnant, and the marriage survived. Raphael chose to forgive his mother and cut ties with Claude. The family then has a happy ending. In fact, happy endings do not exist. Not for Claude, not for Germain. Claude is beaten by Raphael for seducing his mother. Germain also suffers the wrath of Raphael. He spills the beans about Germain stealing test papers. Germain was dismissed from school. Only Claude's story doesn't end there. Germain thinks he is in control of Claude's story. In fact, he was one of the characters. As it turns out, Claude added Raphael's scenes in order to draw out Germain's family connections. He thus learns that Germain and his wife have no children and that Claude's talents are meant to appeal to Jenna's aesthetic. After all, middle-aged women in the middle class by and large have similar troubles. With the slightest provocation from him they will begin to imagine. Surprisingly, Claude's ultimate goal in all this is to take Germain for himself. His Oedipus complex is not that serious. What he desires more than anything is a facilitator. Germain's obsession with literature makes him a perfect facilitator. He wants Germain by destroying the marriage that binds him. Raphael's parents' marriage didn't fall apart because they still had children, but Germain and Jenna have no children, so their marriage is fragile. Then, Claude found Jenna. He knew that this woman had actually been peeking into his story all along. His desire for Raphael's mother. All along, he had been testing Jenna, consciously or unconsciously. This woman who has long been denied the understanding and love of her husband gradually understands that she is not really different from Raphael's mother. In the ending written by Claude, Jenna finally chooses to fall in love with her husband's student and ends her dull and boring marriage with Germain after that. Back home, Germain has been suspended from his job for leaking the title. After seeing Claude's new ending, he suspects that his wife is cheating on him with his student, so he gets into a fight with Jenna. Subsequently, Germain divorced his wife. When Claude sees Germain again, he is sitting disheveled on a street bench staring at the entire building across the street. This man had lost everything. Now, like Claude, he is a man with nothing. Claude tells Germain that he learned in his nature class about a creature called a hermit crab. They like to invade and parasitize inside the shells of other mollusks. During their parasitism they establish a symbiotic and mutualistic relationship with the anemone. When they get tired of staying in one shell and want to change to another suitable house, they will take the anemone with them. Claude then extended an invitation to Germain for another peek. Germain hesitates for a moment and finally smiles. The film begins with one of Germain's weekly assignments, which triggers the creation and treatment of conflicts over the creation of the text, the border between fiction and reality. The director uses a play-within-a-play storytelling technique to drag the audience into the lives of several French families, thereby peeking into the desire and jealousy, loss and warmth between them. But cleverly, the director presents this voyeurism in a literary way, so that Germain, the addicted voyeur, thinks he is perfect. Unbeknownst to him, Germain is also a part of the voyeuristic process called literary creation. Claude is the ultimate voyeur. In addition, the film also points out the hypocrisy of voyeurism. In fact, in contemporary society, everyone is a voyeur. For example, it is obvious that gossip about various celebrities is more popular than written works. We are usually asked about our salaries, jobs, marriages and other personal issues. For us, how is this not another kind of voyeurism?